right. Hi, everybody. It's 7:03, so we'll just get started and people will come and go and feel free to leave if you'd like to. Before we get started, and this is something that really I should have done way back in the first meeting. We really wanted, we designed these parent meetings to be informal and a space where everybody feels welcome to share, whatever's on their mind, whatever experiences they're going through. But we do want to caution that if there is something that you're not satisfied with, maybe a staff member, or if there's a concern with a staff member, to refrain naming names while we're at the meeting, and instead bring your concerns up either to that staff member, or Stephen said you could email him or give him a call, and then you could try to kind of work things out that way, because there's very little that we could do here anyhow, but with everything else, as far as helping with resources or just asking questions about anything, that's what we're here for. So we just wanted to kind of put that out there. And if anyone has any questions about that or any concerns about how our meetings are run, please let me know, or let Stephen know, or your classroom teacher too. Because I just started recording, Emily O'Connor, she is the parent representative who's kind of been working with Stephen to try to secure interns from other countries to work with our students and our paras and specialists and teachers. So Stephen, I don't know if you want to just kind of kick off our meeting by giving us an update on the application. And have you submitted it yet? Or I know it's due next week.
Yep. The application was submitted, and I got an email late this afternoon from the coordinator just acknowledging that she received it. It was due the 25th, and we're asking for 2 interns to be working with us again. And we're optimistic that the people that we screened last year will kind of hang in there and then come back and be with us in the fall. And if that's the case, we feel like we've got 2 really qualified, and I think really quality people. They're young. Everybody's young now. God, I hate getting old. But I think they'll be a really good fit, not only for our school, I think, and working with the kids, but I also think for our community. You know, they've got some real varied interests. I think they're really open-minded to, just diving in and having a great experience. And Emily, you were part of the interviews that we did. I don't know if there's any insights you want to share. You've had contact with both of the candidates as well.
Yeah. They're very different and unique people, but I think they'll both fit in different ways. So there's a young woman named Anna. She's from Madrid, and she seems very sophisticated and cosmopolitan and would love to go to Minneapolis and see like the modern art museums and do those sorts of things, and loves to dance and loves to cook. And so I think that she'll be very interested in that sort of like cultural side. And whereas the other gentleman, Fernando, and he is not, and I'm trying to remember the name of the city he's from, and I'm not going to remember, but he's very, very outdoorsy, like loves mountain biking, loves outdoor adventure. And so I think that he will fit in great with like the families who want to like take him backpacking through the Boundary Waters for a weekend. And whereas Anna will fit in great with the families who want to take her to the Guthrie to see a show. And so I think that they're both just very wonderful people. And I think they'll both fit in great. So.
And part of the experience not only includes, a obligation on our part to provide housing, but also cultural experiences. So we'll talk more about it. But the expectation from Amity is that when those students are here, they really have opportunities to, just dive into the culture, not only of Stillwater, but, St. Paul, Minneapolis, all of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and truly the Midwest. in terms of, where and how they can travel. And Susie and I worked with, did we have 5 Amity interns at Rutherford?
We did one. We only had one at a time, one each year.
Right.
Mhm.
And I think families, I know I talk to people and families still talk about it. And one of the interns, I think, stayed here and got a Minnesota license and is teaching over on the west side of the cities, right?
Two of them actually. Our last intern we had also was teaching, I think in Minnetonka. So
Yep. And I just have to say, to see people come in to be, it's one thing to be touched by the location and the culture, but really it comes down to the connections that they make with people. And, to see them sort of fall in love with a community and make all those connections and then grow and strive is it's just really a cool experience. So I'm looking forward to sharing that. And I think people are going to be really blown away, with what we have here at Lake Elmo. So I'm really excited to involve them and get it going.
The important thing too is even if you can't host and for whatever reason, there's always other ways to support the interns, taking them out to dinner or, taking them shopping. They won't have cars here. They won't be able to drive. Right. And so, so just things like helping them get to appointments. They may have to take classes as part of their internship. So there are so many other ways that we could really support the interns and the families who are hosting the interns, because it's a lot to ask of the families to take in somebody and then to plan activities and events for them. So just kind of start thinking of ways that you might be able to help, and then if you can let me or Emily know what you'd be willing to do. It's just good to know who we could kind of call on if we need to. Does anybody have any questions about the kids going back to school for those of us who were in hybrid and will be switching back? I have a feeling some might.
Can we get the 3rd graders in next week?
Yeah, I wish.
Has anyone had any trouble with the materials pickup? I know if some of the kids are going back next week, that it won't be a big issue anymore, but no.
For those of you that are going to stay in distance learning, we're going to switch back. We switched from, distributing materials in the vestibule. Then we went back to the gym when everybody was, and I think this week we have is it either this week or next week? The next material distribution, whenever it is going to be in the gym. But then after that, starting in February, we'll return to doing it in the vestibule.
One question I think I'd have is, have we heard how Community Ed is doing with reviewing all of the contract updates requests for Adventure Club?
I don't have an insight right now on that. So it's a great question. I know they're working on it, but I did not get an update this week.
I don't know if it's helpful. I know I got just yesterday a confirmation for my son's contract. So, and I put it in like the day that we could resubmit. So I
know I've been working with them to, find staff and get staff allocated. So, I know where they're trying to meet all the needs. Because I was moving some hours around even this afternoon to figure that out.
Yeah, make sure you don't take that as any sort of a critique. It was more curiosity, because I certainly understand the 1,000 miracles that are happening right now to try to make this all work.
I can't remember if we talked about this last week, Stephen, but as far as vaccines for staff, is there anything you can share with us about that?
Yeah, we found out yesterday. Actually, we were contacted that we'll have 17 vaccines available to staff this week. So that's a challenge, when you've got hundreds of staff and how you figure out a priority. What they did is they looked at so the vaccines are really designated for staff who are currently working with students in person. So we looked at that as a priority. Our level 3 special ed students at the elementary school are in person. We have some others in secondary as well. And then tried to identify staff members who were over the age of 60 and or had some kind of medical condition that would require them to receive the vaccine. So that's how those 17 will be distributed this week. Like everyone, we're anxiously awaiting, sort of some changes that will open the floodgates here. I'm a little bit worried that we may have to wait until Johnson & Johnson's vaccine comes out, which may be another month or more away. But, you have a new administration starting tomorrow. So, we'll see how things change. The good news is, back in December, we didn't think any teachers were going to be vaccinated in January. So it's a start.
Does anybody have anything that they want to celebrate? I know we've been talking about difficulties and challenges, but is there anything that your child's been enjoying about the change in the learning model, or just something you've noticed about them in spite of, how they've been learning this year?
I'll share. I think a success with the distance learning piece is at least he's been excited to see his friends that were A days instead of B days. And so kind of to have that whole class as a collective has been really good. He's been happy about that and is obviously excited to see them in person and then see his friends in the other immersion classrooms as well that he's not in class with this year. So.
And my second grader has gotten really spoiled by all the library books that get delivered to her pod at school, which has been super fun for us because she has discovered Laura Ingalls Wilder. And I enjoyed that just a little bit. We just had the first 3 hardcovers arrive here from Barnes & Noble today, but we also been streaming. If anybody is old enough to remember the Little House on the Prairie series that was on TV, which you can get on Prime. So we've been going on a huge nostalgic trip back, looking at all the episodes, and they pegged Nellie Olson like right away. It was brilliant.
Wow. Yeah. Did you happen to see, I think PBS did a documentary. Did you guys pick that up?
I saw it, but I haven't watched it yet. I'm down the All of Creatures Great Small rabbit hole right now since they've rebooted that one.
Yeah, I would really encourage you they did a documentary on Laura Ingalls Wilder that was really well done. So it was back in, gosh, I don't know, I have a DVD, but yeah, it was well done.
Yeah, I think it just aired last month or maybe December, but yeah, I'm looking forward to watching it.
And just kind of an update on that regarding media checkout. The restrictions that we had in place back in the fall, many of those are going to be lifted, especially around sort of physical movement of objects. I think there was a concern, again, back in August about touching and the virus on the surface. And, the science around that just is not as big a threat. So we are going to return to media checkout. So when they come back on the 27th, students will have a chance, and on the 10th, students will start being able to check out books in the media center. We'll continue to provide checkout for those distance learning families through the material distribution. I know our media people are really committed to making that happen.
What percentage is staying online versus coming back? Do we have kind of a ballpark?
Um,
I'm
well, I
curious.
can tell you that um, in this latest change, I had 33 requests from families who were distance learning to go in person. And I had 3 requests from families who were in person to go to distance. So it's about 10 to 1. And from talking to other principals, that, they had similar numbers.
And did you find that the numbers within the Spanish program were similar to what was happening in the English language program?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a number, sort of transitioning over. And couple of our immersion classrooms will be capped at 25.
I guess I had a question. I think since we last met, the new school board is formed, and I'm just curious as to whether you've had much interaction with them yet, and if there's any support needed there that we could be helping with.
Well, I think we talked about this. It's a great question. I have not had much contact with them. I do think if you go back and watch the school board meeting from, I believe it was last week, they had a work session and they talked about immersion and the need to put some resources toward immersion education. And I think that's going to be a real important conversation to pay attention to, because there's two, I'm going to be careful how I say this. There's 2 ways that I think they're approaching that discussion around immersion education. Everyone agrees that we need to put more resources toward immersion education. One part of the school board recognizes that we need to invest in the current program that exists. And I think there's another part of the school board that wants to invest in expansion of our immersion program. So again, right now it's too early to really say what's what. I think the discussion is in its very initial phases. I would argue real strongly that we need to really invest in what we've started and get it into the middle school, and then we can talk about expansion. I do think it's fair if the interest is out there. From the very beginning, we talked about having a north side and a south side program. I would be all for it. I just want to make sure that we get some solid foundation of a program. That would mean at least transitioning one class into 6th grade, and then kind of going back and planning out something that would expand the program. So yeah, if you haven't, I believe that the work session from last Tuesday or Wednesday is online. It's available for you to watch, and you can kind of listen to it. And I'm guessing as you hear the conversations, you can, kind of figure out what the subtleties are of what they mean by supporting immersion education.
Okay, thanks for that. And I think, as always, if there are opportunities for this group to support you in the program in some way, I think if you can give us a heads up on it, I think you'll find you have lots of support there. And at least I would be very happy to reach out and make phone calls and do what I can do to help with that. I imagine others probably would as well. So please don't hesitate to let us know where we can support you.
Well, and I talked about this at the last meeting. The big piece is going to be when it comes to the levy, because I think immersion is going to be part of the levy. And the good news now is, the middle schools recognize that the program is coming. So I don't feel alone in that conversation of saying, hey, we need resources, we need resources, we need resources. I now have middle school administrators that are saying, yeah, hey, what about the immersion program? So that's nice.
Sorry, guys, my computer's acting really sluggish. I just plugged in the YouTube link in the group chat for the meeting from last Tuesday, the 12th, that Stephen was talking about. I think it's really important because, and I'd like to think that the new board members that have come in seem very eager to hear from everybody, at least right off the bat, and to know what's important, especially as we go into next fall. And so if you email them or try to contact them somehow or speak at open forum, I'd like to think that they would be very open-minded and receptive to what we have to say. And it's really us, the parents. They want to hear from us. They want to hear how it's working for our kids. They want to hear how it's working for our families. Everything from transportation, which is something we've been, like asking for since the very beginning, to where to keep the program, what building to put the program. And so it's the questions that keep coming up, and we just need the parents to kind of fill in those answers for them. So it's really important for us to reach out to them and let them know how we feel.
And this, I don't know if this means anything, but just for your information, we have 2 board members that were either current or former Lake Elmo parents. So Allison Sherman and Annie Probani are, have Lake Elmo affiliations. I think that's always nice. They know the school, they know the program. I think that's helpful for them to understand. And I've talked about this before. You've got a new board. There likely will be some discussion about, sort of enrollment and what that looks like, and the north side, sort of south side, and the enrollment pinch that we feel on the south side likely isn't going to go away. I anticipate that there's going to be some online options in the future, which will probably be popular for families, which may relieve some of that enrollment crunch a little bit. But I think beyond just the funding piece, there will be discussions around the home for the program and placement for the program. As we have those discussions, I'll continue to remind people that we're very intentional about developing the program at Lake Elmo. We really looked at it as a dual immersion program or a 2-way immersion program. And one of the important elements of that, obviously, to have an immersion program in the community, which was way, way, way overdue, but also was to meet the needs of our Spanish-speaking families that live not only in Lake Elmo, but at the time within the entire Stillwater community. And there's a lot of evidence that show in a 2-way immersion model that students, both who are native English speakers and native Spanish speakers, their learning is accelerated. So there's a benefit for both groups. Long-term, there's also a benefit in terms of achievement for those Spanish-speaking students. So it really was a win-win situation, and it made a lot of sense for Lake Elmo to be the home. There are going to be a lot of challenges around that as we move forward. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion about building a new school. We built Brookview, and I think, Brookview cost 20 to 25 million. I don't remember off the top of my head. If you went out to bid a new elementary school right now, that's 600 kids, you're talking in the range of 40 to 50 million dollars. So it's almost doubled in 5 or 6 years. So that's going to be difficult, I think, for the community to kind of figure out on the heels of a pandemic and all the challenges that we're facing right now. So, Dan brings up a really good point. I think there's going to be a lot of conversations, not only about funding, but placement of the program. And I think it's just really important to know what is being talked about and, kind of what's behind and what's motivating some of those conversations.
Yeah, one of the points that's really resonated with me is that I know that there's been some discussion about potentially picking the program up and moving it to Oak Park to try to relieve some of the compression of students at Lake Elmo. One of the things that's really resonated with me from learning about the program and talking to some of the school board members is I think that will do serious harm to the program for all the reasons that Stephen just said. I think it will divorce it from where its natural home is. I think the program was cited where it is for a reason. And I think that will really be a negative. So I've tried to reiterate that for the school board because I think it sounds good to potentially move it and expand it, but I think it really will be detrimental. So to the extent there's opportunity, if people feel the same way, if there's opportunities to reiterate that, I think that's useful because at the end of the day, it's supposed to be for the benefit of the kids in the program. And I think moving it goes at cross purposes with that.
And it's really interesting. If you haven't seen the new promotional video that we did, I really encourage you to watch it. There's a parent, Lillian Arpizano, who speaks in Spanish and talks about the program from her perspective as a heritage language speaker. She's had kids who were in Lake Elmo prior to the immersion program, so she really sees both sides of what that experience is. Again, as someone who is a second language speaker in this community, and she was so thrilled to be able to talk in favor of the program, and was so excited to be able to say positive things about it because she really sees the transformation, not only in the opportunity to bring the language in, but the cultural transformation that's taken place within the building. Many of you aren't aware of the fact that 6.5 years ago, if you were a non-English speaker and you didn't have documentation, you weren't, and you didn't have the credentials or the documentation, to prove citizenship, you weren't allowed in the building, which shouldn't have been happening. But under the then administration, that was their practice. So that's a huge transformation in terms of a shift in creating a more welcoming and inclusive environment, which again benefits all of our children because that's the world they're going to be living in.
Switching gears a little bit, just out of curiosity, what's the response been like for families registering for kindergarten next year? What is it looking like, Stephen?
Yeah, I don't have any statistics right now. We have a meeting. I think it's this Friday we're meeting, and that's the topic. That's the agenda item to go over. I do know I can share with you that on the 26th of January, so next week, we will post 2 positions for 4th grade internally. So the posting process in Stillwater schools, we do a 2-phase internal. So you have phase 1 internal posting and then a second internal posting, and then it can go public after that. So we'll have 2 rounds, they refer to it as, in late January, early February. I'm not expecting any internal candidates who are tenured teachers, and then it would go public. So we'll be looking in February, mid and late February, to hire the 4th grade teachers.
Stephen, I had a question about the car dealership next door. Any word on what's happening with that property or what's planned for it?
I don't. I'm kind of getting mixed messages. And we haven't heard anything in the last week or so. So not sure. I sort of sarcastically told some teachers that that was going to be the new Lake Elmo school, and that instantly became a rumor. So I have to be careful. Sometimes people don't understand my sense of humor, which gets me in trouble.
I know this came up in the beginning of the school year, and again, just out of curiosity, and you mentioned, I think you mentioned maybe some classes moving to online permanently, but what I'm trying to get at is with the staff that we have, the extra staff that we had hired because of distance learning, will we keep the same amount of staff members, of teachers that we have for next year, or are we going to keep will the class sizes shift at all or anything like that?
The class sizes should not change at all. We had to add staff so that we could accommodate our online programming for this school year. You know, one of the challenging pieces is going to be, in order to have, outside of, the governor's orders that we're currently under, to have an online program like we're currently running, you need to qualify as a online academy, and there's a certain process that you have to go through the Department of Ed. A lot of schools had started down the road of that. We were not as far along on that, and so I don't know that we'd be able to get everything in place to meet the state requirements for the start of next school year. There's some conversation that the governor might extend that option into next year, where schools can continue to provide those online classes and, give families an option. So, we'll have to kind of wait and see what that looks like. So if we continue with the online programming, yes, it's possible that the staff would remain similar to what it is now. If we do not, then we would
Does anybody else have anything anything else that they want to add tonight, or any other questions, any other comments? We don't have to go to 8. So
Can I just ask a question? And maybe this is difficult to assess, but we all kind of feel like this is a challenge. Do you see how kids are, progressing? Does it seem like kids are kind of progressing as they normally would throughout the year, or have we seen some fallback from the past year in their progression and their learning?
Yeah, I might lean on you a little bit, Susie, to add to this, because you have more hands-on experience than I do. It's really interesting because I think it's hard to describe this, but I would say actually both is true. So we have evidence to show that where kids are engaged and involved, they're really thriving. And again, we all and you see this, right? Kids can be so resilient. On the flip side of that, though, there are so many more barriers to that engagement that are preventing kids from being fully just in the learning. And those barriers are creating some challenges for kids. And so, I think we're going to see a number of students that have fallen, behind. not, not always because of the way the system is set up. It's just for whatever the reason, there are multiple barriers that get in the way that prevent them from learning in the best situation. But I think the opposite is also true. I talked to some teachers last week, and they highlighted how pleased they were and identified a number of students that were progressing despite the challenges. So, we will continue to collect data. As you probably know, we do an assessment called FastBridge, and it's an A math and an A reading. We give it 2nd through 5th grade. We do it in the fall, winter, and spring. For those of you that were in distance learning, many of you helped your kids take the assessment in the fall. And we're now doing that in the winter, and we'll take it in spring. So as we look at those results, we'll have a better idea of kind of where that trend is going and the overall impact. I think the biggest concern is, just the unseen impact that it's having on kids. And I'm not sure we're going to know the full extent of that until we return to some normalcy. And I'm really anxious to see what it's like when we're back in school. How are kids going to respond? For our kindergartners, they were in school our first graders. Some of our first graders were in school until March last year and really haven't had a true school experience since then. So, almost more of their school experience has been disrupted than was actually, kind of what we think of as normal. So what is it going to be like for those first graders to be back in the classroom starting next week? And, are they going to have the tolerance and resilience to be, present every single day in person? I don't know if you want to add anything, Susie, that you see.
No, I would just echo what you're saying. For those of you that don't know, I am the interventionist for the immersion program. And so I work with students who are struggling in reading and math. And I have to do some winter mid-year assessments with them, and also along the way I progress monitor to see how they're doing. And first of all, I gotta say thank you to the parents who are supporting these kids, because I think of all my students that I see, which is about 41 students, almost every single one log on every day. So I think that's a huge shout out to the parents who are supporting them and helping them get on. And I think that also goes out to just in general, the fact that parents are supporting kids at home. And I know it's difficult. I have my own challenges with my own 3rd grader and trying to support that too. But from what I've been seeing, I think kids are making progress. And I think you'd actually be surprised at how well they're doing. I get it as a teacher and as a parent, and just thinking, oh, really, are they learning? Are they getting something out of it? But they really are. And I think sometimes, especially with immersion, they're taking in more than maybe we're realizing that they are. So I think we just have to be grateful that we have an amazing team of immersion teachers who are, they're not going to give up on our kids, and they're going to, keep supporting them and trying to help their academics as well. And I think, honestly, I think we're in pretty good shape.
Julie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I know that some of the kids took their, so for my 3rd grader, so his Spanish reading last week, English reading, and then their math assessment. When are parents going to find out kind of where their kids are currently falling? Because I know that's something I'm curious about.
So teachers will be able to share some feedback when we have our February conferences. So conferences, I have a calendar in front of me, but I think it's, let me just look quickly, the 15th and the 18th. So we have conferences that, from 3:30 to I believe, 8 o'clock on the 18th, and from noon until 8 o'clock on the 15th. So you'll get something. I think there's a couple sentences about conferences in the newsletter that's going to go out this Friday. But the following Friday, the sign up for conferences will be there. And we'll do it the way we did it in fall. In fact, I'm guessing we may no longer have in-person conferences. The Zoom conferences were so well attended, and I got so much positive feedback from families. We'll see where that goes in the future. So that'll be an option that'll be available. I also believe it's listed in Skyward as well.
Before we go, this is the last scheduled parent meeting for the immersion families. I didn't have any others on the calendar. I didn't know if it was something that everybody wanted to continue to have once a month, or if we should take a break and maybe come back together at the end of the school year, maybe in April or May, just to kind of recap and talk about how the rest of the year went. Any thoughts on that, or should we just kind of play it by ear? I'll put out maybe like a questionnaire or something to all the families and on the Facebook group too. But what do you guys think?
I think it's great. I love having it. If it's on the calendar, it just sort of show up. If you want to revisit kind of the pacing of it, I'm certainly open to that. But yeah, I think it's great. Thanks for setting it up. And I'd encourage us to continue having it at least on the calendar.
Okay.
Yeah, worst comes to worst, we can always cancel one if something comes up and we can.
Okay. Do the days work for everybody? Do you thinking Tuesdays are okay, or did you prefer Mondays?
Tuesdays are great right now.
Right. Anything can happen. Anything can change, but we'll stick with Tuesdays then.
I
Stephen?
don't know. Life is in an upheaval here in the next 2 weeks, so we'll see.
I got one final question. Do we know if the bus app might be up and running as we start to ramp up back to school again?
Mr. Drummerhausen told me last week that it would be. But they're still working on it.
Is there an unofficial betting pool we can participate in?
No, but I'll set up a side bet with you.
If nobody has anything else to add, we can wrap it up here now. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it looks like Kathy might have a question.
Oh, sorry, Kathy.
That's okay.
Scared
Sorry, I was walking on the treadmill, so I wasn't on video, but I got off. I did just have one question, right? You got to get those steps in while you can.
I know.
I was just curious. I joined a little late, but I was wondering about just future state, COVID or not, like maybe technology resources for the kids, lessons learned in terms of the technology that the students do or don't have. And I don't necessarily have a strong opinion either way, but I was just curious if there was anything in the works in terms of grants for iPads, laptops, Chromebooks, any of those types of things from a technology resources standpoint.
Yeah, it's a great question. I may have talked a little bit about it, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself because I can't remember what I've shared in meetings. We're one of the few metro school districts that does not have a technology levy. There's going to be a levy on the ballot in the fall. It likely will have a technology component to it. Honestly, that we desperately have to have that. We're in a situation where, just to give you some sense of what that can do to a school district, South Washington County has a technology levy. They have passed it several years in a row. Last spring, when they recognized what was going to be happening this fall, they purchased Chromebooks for all of their elementary students. We're in a position where we were trying to buy their cast-offs. So the technology that they were getting rid of to replace, we were trying to purchase to get a hold of. So You know, it's hard to talk about it because we're, we're not in a position where we should be. We've got a lot of growth to go in that area, but we're going to have to figure out how to infuse some capital into that if we're going to move ahead. I think you're on mute, Kathy.
I did. So from a parent perspective, is that, or Dan's perspective, and his comments about parental involvement, or, is that something that we can help or rally around or ask or email or?
I think that's something you can start to talk to the board about right now.
Okay.
I think, we're in the middle of this. Your experiences are fresh. I think letting them know, where we are and the challenges we're having with the technology is, yeah, absolutely. I've got a tech person who, is working 14 hours a day, and one of her biggest responsibilities is cannibalizing Chromebooks, and putting them back together so, she can redistribute usable technology. We're in a community where we shouldn't have to rely on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's helpful. Thank you.
It was interesting on that from parent perspective. So at the start of the year, Chromebooks were really hard to come by, and at stores they were all purchased. So I relied on the school to have one for my son, so he didn't have to use one of my work devices. And then at Christmas time, things were a little bit more available, so he got a new Chromebook, and just the comments from his teacher about, like, did you get a new device? Like, the audio is better, the camera is better. She was able to see his assignments better and hear his responses. And so that's huge, I think, just from a communication standpoint, with teachers being able to have the feedback and the materials that they need from the students to make the assessments on, are they making the growth or not? So that's definitely a huge need, and happy to email the board and call them on that.
Yeah.
And this is just a plug that if you have any families that are still in need of Chromebooks or hotspots, the Lake Elmo Library is now checking out Chromebooks and hotspots. They have a bunch available for families or any residents of Washington County. You can go in and request one. So.
Oh, that's great to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe we could put that on the parental Facebook page. That would be a good thing to add.
One other thing on the levies that just for awareness, when I've talked with a handful of the board members, it seems like they're trying to figure out when they're going to go ask the community for in the next election. And I think they see three things that are possible, and they're fearful about asking for too much and not getting a yes. So they've got the existing operating levy, which it sounds like the district is desperate to at least renew at the current rate, because if we don't do that, that ends up being $11 to $12 million each year in the budget that just goes away. And so very difficult to overcome that. So I think getting that renewed is sort of priority number one. Then there's the technology levy, which I think everyone agrees is really important. And then there's the bonds that would help to go to build more buildings. So expand Brookview, replace Lake Elmo, do other things. I think the board, or at least some portions of the board, think that asking for three things is suicide and will not work, and that at least one of them will be a no, if not more. So I think they're going to go for two, is what it seems like. And so then the question is, which two? The levies are sort of more immediate, but it doesn't help us on the bond side. So when you're talking to these folks, if that's helpful, that's the sense that I've gotten. From my perspective, all three are critically important, especially for folks at Lake Elmo. So it becomes challenging because I think that depending on where you are in the district, the relative priorities of those might differ. So we'll have to see how that plays out sort of for us and for our program, because the bond issue is what will drive getting a new building. Without that, we don't make headway, but the levies are more important in the short term.
And just to give you some perspective on that, thanks, Dan. It's really helpful insight. The last time we went out for a levy, which I believe is 6 years ago now, we did go in the fall, and I think there were 3 questions. and they did not pass. So you have a chance to come back in the spring, came back in the spring of the year and were able to pass it. But when you do that, then it's a limited version of what you tried to pass in the fall. It didn't have necessarily all the bells and whistles, just because it becomes so critical just to extend that levy base that we have. So the way the levy dollars work right now, we have the levy through the end of the 22-23 school year. I'm sorry, the 21-22 school year. At the end of the 2022 school year, it expires. So next fall, we have our first opportunity, not a first, but that's when the board will go out. If we fail, it is possible to go back in the spring.
White Bear Lake passed a very, we just moved into the district, but White Bear Lake passed a huge one. And I will say they did an amazing job of quantifying for the residents how much that actually, because I think that's the fear and that's what they were afraid is it was kind of an all or nothing. But they did a just amazing job of quantifying really how much that really is going to affect each citizen in the White Bear Lake area based off their taxes, and just did a phenomenal job of that. And then they had a lot of parents just involved making phone calls, really letting people know that, how is that really going to affect you? And it was turns out it's pretty minimal on a person by person, but when you saw the big number, it scared people. So as they get towards that, it might be something worth looking at and talking to them. I think they just did a really great job at it.
Well, and it'll be important to highlight, especially if we go to a bond. And this is always hard for me to talk about, but we're going to have to highlight those areas of our physical structure that are less than desirable. So some of you have had kids in the portables, if they're in the portables and the HVAC is working, and your child's not sitting next to the teacher, it's really hard for them to hear anything that's going on. I don't necessarily even believe that the physical structure would pass an inspection in 2020. Yet we've kind of, the city of Lake Elmo is kind of looking the other way just because they know that the situation we're in. So I think it's okay to be able to talk about that, and that's just one of several examples that it's really important for people to hear those stories because our kids deserve better.
I will say that no matter what the shape of the building is, I know my son, just having gone to some of the, school day care when it's been offered at some of the newer, fancier schools, Brookview, Rutherford, Lake Elmo is the best school ever in the entire world. So, and that just says something about the amazing staff and community there that you guys create despite some of the not optimal teaching environments.
Yeah. Thank you. I will look forward Friday. I took the slideshow that I sent out in late August, early September, and rebooted it for a return to school on the 27th and 10th. So kind of walk through space by space, what it'll mean to be on the buses, what lunch is going to look like, kind of what hallway, classroom, specialist. It's a bit lengthy, but the details will be coming out to everyone. So you have a chance to see that.
As far as things to bring back to school, or is there anything that we should give our kids a heads up on as far as different rules that might be in place from the fall that compared to when they started in the beginning of the fall? Is there anything different for them to expect? I know that the distance with the 3 feet versus 6 feet is a little bit different, but anything else we need to think about bringing?
No, I think, there's going to be, for those kids that were in the building, that there'll be some familiarity. I think those first few days, especially for our K1 and 2 students, it'll just be, if you're one of those students that was in the building previously, look around you and see if any of your friends need help, because we're going to have some new kindergartners come in. It's going to be their first day in the building, and it's one thing to manage a first day of school in August where, all you're bringing is your backpack, but now you're going to bring your snow pants and your boots and your jacket, and you've got to have a locker, and it's just a lot for a 5 and a 6-year-old to manage. And they'll have to manage the bus, getting from the bus or from the carpool to their classroom, and they might not know where that is, so they may need some help there. I am going to keep an eye on the carpool. If in the next couple of weeks the carpool looks really crowded, I may have kindergarten move to the front of the building and do drop off at the front of the building just to relieve some of the backup in the back of the building. But I'm going to kind of reserve that decision until I can kind of see what our numbers may look like.
Stephen, we have 2 questions about the playground. Julie's asking, are masks going to be required on the playground? And Kathy wants to know if the playground will still be split into quadrants.
Yeah, the playground will be split into 4 zones, just the way it was in the fall. Kids do not have to wear masks on playground. One of the biggest changes is when we were in physical education back in the fall, kids did not have to wear masks. That requirement has changed. Kids will be wearing masks now in physical education. So the only time kids will be able to take their masks off, unless they have a waiver, the only time they'll be able to take a mask off will be for lunch. And 3 through 5 will have lunch in the classroom, and K1 and 2 will have lunch in the cafeteria. And lunch in the cafeteria has to be social distanced. Lunch in the classroom does not have to be social distanced. So there are some contradictions in the order that came out. I think that's one of the biggest challenges I'm going to have to work through in explaining to kids and parents. And it's certainly been a challenge with teachers, where in one space, we're expecting kids to be social distance, and in another, like the classroom, we're not. So.
And the 3rd through 5th graders, they could still purchase lunch from the cafeteria. They don't need to, they're not mandated to bring their own lunch, even though
Nope, they'll be able to buy their lunches.
Okay.
I have a question. In the fall, my daughter was required to bring all of her stuff back and forth every day, like every notebook, every pencil, 20 glue sticks. They couldn't leave anything in their locker just in case of, they got shut down for quarantine. Well, now it's winter. We have, snow pants and boots and lunch boxes, and there's no way that they can fit all that in the backpack. Are they going to allow them to leave stuff now?
Yes, I believe that we will be having things in the locker. We talked about that. So, yeah, I just physically, I'm not sure it's going to be possible to bring everything back and forth.
Anything else?
Just a note on the gym. My preschooler's been back in school, and he's taking an extra mask because he gets sweaty. He's a sweaty little guy. So just a heads up, pack extra masks because that for him has been huge. He's like, I can change it because it gets all sweaty. So
yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Do all teachers have extra masks? Do the classrooms all have 1 mask per student, or was that, I know that some had gotten in the beginning of the year and some were waiting.
They got some at the beginning of the year, yes. and they distributed all of them that they had. So we do not have any more masks for students in the building, with the exception of, we've got the disposable masks to give to kids to wear for the day if they forget or if they need one. And then we're awaiting face shields. The governor in his order also said that they were going to deliver additional face shields for teachers to use.
Julie, I'm sorry I cut you off.
That's okay. I was just going to say, in Ian's backpack, he has a bag full of clean masks and a bag for dirty masks, so that he can change it multiple times a day if he needs to or wants to. And then once obviously the clean bag is empty and the dirty bag is full, we wash those. So
yeah, it's a great idea. And Lacey, your question about extra masks donated, we're always looking for extra masks to have available. So yeah, if you want to donate, a parent donated some face shields too, and is going to deliver them later this week. So that's always appreciated.
Are you thinking disposable or cloth ones, Stephen?
If they have, new cloth ones that they're willing to donate, those would be accepted.
Okay. All right. I think we'll wrap it up here. It's just after 8. We will try to. I'll just get some dates on the calendar for the rest of the year, and if it looks like there isn't too much interest, maybe we'll cancel one if we need to. But we'll just have them available for whoever wants to get together like this. I'm glad you guys could make it tonight. Thank you. It's nice to see you.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Have a great night, everybody.
Have a great night. Hang in there.
Thank you.